सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
कैसे समझाऊं तुझे कितना मैं चाहूं तुझे, कैसे मैं बता दूं तुझे रे।
मेरी है कसम तुझे इतना बता दे मुझे, कितना तू चाहे मुझे रे।
हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
तुझको है बताना मुश्किल,
सीने में है कितनी धड़कन, ओ कोई भी न जाने जाने मन।
कितना सयाना है तू, कितना दीवाना है तू, इतना बता दे मुझे रे।
हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता। होता है प्यार बता दिलबर, हो कैसे अचानक मिल जाती है नजर।
क्या होता है दर्द मोहब्बत का, क्यों नहीं मिलती दर्द दिल की दवा।
हो कैसा नजराना है ये, कैसा अफसाना है ये, इतना बता दे मुझे रे।
हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
पल पल तड़पाए, हाय क्यों तू सपनों में आए जाए।
तौबा क्या खुमारी है ये, कैसी बेकरारी है ये, इतना बता दे मुझे रे।
हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता, मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
कैसे समझाऊं तुझे कितना मैं चाहूं तुझे, कैसे मैं बता दूं तुझे रे।
मेरी है कसम तुझे इतना बता दे मुझे, कितना तू चाहे मुझे रे।
हर सवाल का जवाब
प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
हर सवाल का जवाब नहीं मिल सकता।
मेरे प्यार का हिसाब नहीं मिल सकता।
मन मधुबन से ये संदेशा लाई है, दो सांसों की दो रूहों की आज मिलन रुत आई है।
तुझे
दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ।
बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। होके जुदा मुझसे तुझे क्या चैन आता है।
दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। सपनों की रानी बनी,
तुझसे मिली मैं दीवानी बनी।
तू मेरे सपनों की रानी बनी।
आए सनम प्यार करने के दिन,
हाँ पलकों तले जीने मरने के दिन। की रस्में दुनिया की कसमें तोड़ के आ जाना। दुनिया की रस्में दुनिया की कसमें तोड़ के आ जाना। क्या दूर जाके दिल तेरा मुझे भूल जाता है।
तेरी याद सताती है, मुझे पास बुलाती है। तेरी याद सताती है, मुझे पास बुलाती है।
चेहरे से अब आँख हटती नहीं।
तेरे बिना रात कटती नहीं।
चेहरे से अब आँख हटती नहीं।
तेरे बिना रात कटती नहीं।
कोई भी जाने ना हालत मेरी,
पागल बना देगी चाहत तेरी।
इस बेकरारी में आए मजा।
धक धक धड़के जिया मोर तड़पे दर्द बढ़ा जाए। धक धक धड़के जिया मोर तड़पे दर्द बढ़ा जाए। ये प्यार क्या तुझको भी रातों को जगाता है।
बेताब सा रहता हूँ, हर दर्द में सहता हूँ। बेताब सा रहता हूँ, हर दर्द में सहता हूँ।
बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। बोले मेरा कंगना तेरे बिन सजना नींद नहीं आती। होके जुदा मुझसे तुझे क्या चैन आता है।
दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ। दिन रात तड़पता हूँ, मिलने को तरसता हूँ।
करना, वादा कभी न करना, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है।
मिलने की तुम कोशिश करना, वादा कभी न करना, मिलने की तुम कोशिश करना, वादा कभी न करना, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है।
जब भी तेरा जी चाहे तू पास मेरे आ जाना, मेरा प्यार बस तेरे लिए है, तू न कभी घबराना। जब भी तेरा जी चाहे तू पास मेरे आ जाना, मेरा प्यार बस तेरे लिए है, तू न कभी घबराना। लेकिन सपनों में मिलने की कभी न कोशिश करना, लेकिन सपनों में मिलने की कभी न कोशिश करना, सपना तो टूट जाता है, सपना तो टूट जाता है, सपना तो टूट जाता है, सपना तो टूट जाता है।
होती है बेदर्द बहुत ही इस दुनिया की रस्में, मुश्किल कर देती है निभाना प्यार वफा की कसमें। होती है बेदर्द बहुत ही इस दुनिया की रस्में, मुश्किल कर देती है निभाना प्यार वफा की कसमें। शीशे जैसे अरमा लेकर राहों से न गुजरना, शीशे जैसे अरमा लेकर राहों से न गुजरना, शीशा तो टूट जाता है, शीशा तो टूट जाता है, शीशा तो टूट जाता है, शीशा तो टूट जाता है।
मिलने की तुम कोशिश करना, वादा कभी न करना,
मिलने की तुम कोशिश करना, वादा कभी न करना,
वादा तो टूट जाता है, वादा तो टूट जाता है,
वादा तो टूट जाता है,
वादा तो टूट जाता है। इश्क है क्या एक रोग बुरा, ये इश्क है क्या एक रोग बुरा, ना भूख लगे ना प्यास लगे कोई दर्द हो सह लेना,
किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना।
ये इश्क है क्या एक रोग बुरा, ये इश्क है क्या एक रोग बुरा, ना भूख लगे ना प्यास लगे कोई दर्द हो सह लेना,
किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना। तो बांध लिया प्यार की सलाखों से, दिन में करार नहीं नींद गई आंखों से, मुझको तो बांध लिया प्यार की सलाखों से।
अब ना जी लागे
क्या होगा आगे,
कटती ना रातें,
झूठी है बातें,
सारे दुखों का साथी यही है दवा, ये इश्क है क्या
एक रोग बुरा,
ये इश्क है क्या
ओ एक रोग बुरा,
ना भूख लगे
ना प्यास लगे
कोई दर्द हो सह लेना,
किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना। दो छोड़ो,
वादा ना तोड़ो,
लगती हो पागल, देखो करो ना मुझसे ऐसी खता,
ये इश्क है क्या,
हाँ एक रोग बुरा,
ये इश्क है क्या,
एक रोग बुरा,
ना भूख लगे
ना प्यास लगे,
कोई दर्द हो सह लेना,
किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना,
किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना, किसी को दिल नहीं देना।
जब दिल न लगे दिलदार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब दिल न लगे दिलदार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब करना हो हमसे प्यार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब करना हो हमसे प्यार हमारी गली आ जाना।
जब याद सताए तुम्हें यार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब याद सताए तुम्हें यार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब करना हो दीदार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब करना हो दीदार हमारी गली आ जाना।
जब नींद आए ना रातों को रानी, करने लगे तंग तुझको जवानी, जब नींद आए ना रातों को रानी, करने लगे तंग तुझको जवानी, धड़कन सताए जादू जगाए मौसम करे छेड़खानी, जब जुबना पे आए निखार हमारी गली आ जाना, जब दिल न लगे दिलदार हमारी गली आ जाना।
जब हद से बढ़ने लगे बेकरारी, जब उम्र जाए ना तन्हा गुजारी, जब हद से बढ़ने लगे बेकरारी, जब उम्र जाए ना तन्हा गुजारी, नजदीक आके तन से लगा के कर लेना तुम बात सारी, ना करना कभी इंतजार हमारी गलियां जाना, जब याद सताए तुम्हें याद हमारी गलियां जाना,
जब दिल न लगे दिलदार हमारी गली आ जाना,
जब करना हो दीदार हमारी गलियां जाना, आ जाना 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 आ जाना। सहते सहते तुम जो ना आते हम तो मर जाते। कब तक अकेले जिंदा रहते, तुमसे कहे क्या बीती जो दिल पे दर्द जुदाई सहते सहते।
राह में उनसे मुलाकात हो गई, राह में उनसे मुलाकात हो गई। जिससे डरते थे वही बात हो गई।
वही बात हो गई। आहा हा 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 हा, आहा हा हा हा।
इश्क के नाम से डर लगता था, दिल के अंजाम से डर लगता था। इश्क के नाम से डर लगता था, दिल के अंजाम से डर लगता था, दिल के अंजाम से डर लगता था। आशिकी वो ही मेरे साथ हो गई, आशिकी वो ही मेरे साथ हो गई। जिससे डरते थे वही बात हो गई।
आहा हा 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 हा, आहा हा हा हा। तेरे बिन कुछ नहीं भाता है मुझे, हर तरफ तू नजर आता है मुझे। तेरे बिन कुछ नहीं भाता है मुझे, हर तरफ तू नजर आता है मुझे, हर तरफ तू नजर आता है मुझे। जिंदगी
धड़कन की तरह।
आँख रोए नाम पे तेरे सावन की तरह।
तू समाई दिल में मेरे धड़कन की तरह, धड़कन की तरह।
हर तरफ प्यार की बरसात हो गई, हर तरफ प्यार की बरसात हो गई।
जिससे डरते थे वही बात हो गई।
हा 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 हा। आहा हा हा हा।
राह में उनसे मुलाकात हो गई,
राह में उनसे मुलाकात हो गई।
जिससे डरते थे वही बात हो गई।
आहा हा 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 हा। आहा हा हा हा।
मैंने प्यार तुम्ही से किया है, मैंने दिल भी तुम्ही को दिया है। मैंने प्यार तुम्ही से किया है, मैंने दिल भी तुम्ही को दिया है। अब चाहे जो हो जाए मैं दुनिया से अब न डरूं, तुझी से मैं प्यार करूं। मैं दुनिया से अब न डरूं, तुझी से मैं प्यार करूं। मैंने प्यार तुम्ही से किया है, मैंने दिल भी तुम्ही को दिया है। अब चाहे जो हो जाए मैं दुनिया से अब न डरूं, तुझी से मैं प्यार करूं। मैं दुनिया से अब न डरूं, तुझी से मैं प्यार करूं। मैंने प्यार तुम्ही से किया है, मैंने दिल भी तुम्ही को दिया है। ऐलान यही करने आया मैं आज यहाँ, मरने आया। रुसवा तुझे मैं कर जाऊंगा, खा के जहर अब मर जाऊंगा, खा के जहर अब मर जाऊंगा।
So today we are starting a new chapter, that is the urogynecology, in which first of all we will talk about the definitions of certain important terms. First one is the irritative symptoms of the bladder, in which first one is the frequency. Frequency means the passing of urine more than 7 times a day. Second one is the urgency. Urgency means the sudden desire to urinate. Third one is the nocturia. Nocturia means the loss of urine during night time, or waking up from sleep during night time more than 1 time to urinate. Next is the urge incontinence. Urge incontinence means the involuntary loss of urine that is because of the increase in the detrosal muscle contraction. And the stress incontinence is also the loss of urine, but it is because of certain stressful condition or physical effort, that is the increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. Overflow incontinence means the loss of the urine due to over distension of the bladder. And overactive bladder involve a combination of the urinary frequency, urgency, and the urge incontinence. Next is the obstructive symptoms of the urinary tract that usually occur in the BPH, that include the weak stream. Weak stream means there is the decrease or reduction in the flow of the urine. Hesitancy means that there is difficulty in the initiation of the urination. And dribbling means there is a prolongation of the final part of the urination, and patient have slow and trickling of the urine. Now let's talk about the normal physiology of maturation and the continence. Continence means the ability to hold the urine and prevent the urination, and maturation is the process of urination. Normally there is a balance between the urethral closure and the detrosal muscle activity. The physiology of continence is that during continence there is activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and the sympathetic nervous system causes relaxation of the detrosal muscle, and similarly they also causes a constriction of the internal sphincter and the pudendal nerve. They control the external sphincter, and hence the external and internal sphincter remains contracted, and the urine is held in the bladder. And this is the normal physiology of continence. When the bladder is full and the person want to urinate, then there is activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system causes contraction of the detrosal muscle, and similarly a parasympathetic nervous system act on the internal sphincter and causes relaxation of the internal sphincter, and similarly there is also inhibition of the pudendal nerve. Now, when the pudendal nerve is inhibited, the external sphincter also relax. So when the sphincters relax and the detrosal muscle contract, they will lead to the process of urination. So the parasympathetic nervous system causes urination, whereas the sympathetic nervous system, they relax the bladder muscle, they also constrict the sphincters, so they hold the urine. So and normally the internal sphincter is supplied by the sympathetic nervous system, and the external sphincter that is supplied by the pudendal nerve, and the pudendal nerve is under the voluntary control, means that it is under the control of the person, but the internal sphincter is under autonomic control, and the internal sphincter is normally controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, it is mostly involved in the process of the continence, which means the ability to hold the urine, and the activation of parasympathetic nervous system is involved in the process of maturation, which means the ability to urinate. And during continence, the sympathetic nervous system, they relax the detrosal muscle, and similarly they also constrict the internal and external sphincter, mostly the internal sphincter, and hence the urine is held. But during maturation, the parasympathetic nervous system activation causes contraction of the detrosal muscle, and similarly the internal sphincter relax, and the external sphincter is relaxed by inhibiting the pudendal nerve, and will lead to the process of maturation. Next is the investigation that we do for the urinary incontinence. First include the baseline investigation. So initially we do the urine RE, and by obtaining the midstream urine sample. Similarly, we also do the bladder diary. So the bladder diary is done to maintain the patient input and output record of the fluid, and it is usually adequate when it is done there for 3 days. Next is the PET test. So PET test is done to verify and quantify the amount of the urinary loss, and PET test involve wearing a pre-weighted sanitary pad while performing certain provocative maneuvers such as climbing stair, and during this provocative maneuver we quantify the amount of the urinary loss. And this the PET test is not helpful in determining the cause of the urinary leakage, and the PET test is reliable and reproducible when done for at least 24 hours. So in the baseline investigation, we do urine RE to exclude the infection. We do a bladder diary in which we maintain the input and output record, and the PET test is done to quantify the amount of urinary loss during performing certain provocative maneuvers. Next is the imaging. So in the imaging, we do pelvic ultrasound to exclude any pelvic pathology. Similarly, we also do the renal and bladder ultrasound to exclude the incomplete emptying of the bladder, and also to look for any congenital abnormalities such as posterior urethral wall, any stones or tumor in the urinary bladder. Next is the urodynamic studies. So urodynamic studies involve a group of tests that are used to assess the function of the urinary tract. And urodynamic study, we assess the various aspects of the urinary system, like storage of the urine and the evacuation of the urine. And these tests are not done routinely, because these tests are costly and they are invasive. And the indication for the urodynamic studies involve history of previous surgery for incontinence, if there is a history of surgery for the prolapse, if there are symptoms of mixed urinary incontinence, a recurrent symptom, and similarly if there is neurogenic bladder that occur in diabetes and multiple sclerosis. In these cases, we do advise the urodynamic study. And the most important test in urodynamic study is the cystometry. The cystometry, they tell us about the following parameters. That is, the residual volume of urine in the bladder is less than 50 ml, and a first desire to urinate comes around when there is 350 ml of urine in the bladder, and the capacity of bladder is around 500 ml. And similarly, the rate of the peak flow rate of the urine is 15 ml per second when the volume of urine in the bladder is more than 150 ml. And the abnormalities that can be detected under urodynamic studies include stress incontinence. Stress incontinence means the loss of urine due to increase in the intra-abdominal pressure, that is during cupping and sneezing. And detrusor overactivity means there is a contraction of the detrusor muscle during the pelling phase, but there is no leakage of urine. But there is detrusor overactivity with incontinence means that due to the excessive contraction of detrusor muscle, there is loss of urine occur. And mixed incontinence means they include both the symptoms of the stress incontinence and the detrusor overactivity. Now let's talk about the classification of the incontinence. So the urinary incontinence is divided into the stress incontinence, urge incontinence, overflow incontinence, and the mixed incontinence. Incontinence means the inability to hold urine. So in the classification, the first and most important is the stress incontinence. Stress incontinence means the involuntary loss of urine that occur due to the increase in the intra-abdominal pressure that occur during sneezing or cupping, and there is no detrusal muscle contraction. So in stress incontinence, the involuntary loss of urine occur because of increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. And the stress incontinence, which is diagnosed after the urodynamic study, urodynamic testing, is known as dynamic stress incontinence. Now let's talk about the pathophysiology of the stress incontinence. So the stress incontinence normally occur due to the incompetent urethral sphincter. So when there is a rise in the intra-abdominal pressure and the urethral sphincter is incompetent, then there will be loss of the urine occur. And the incompetent urethral sphincter may be because of the intrinsic sphincter deficiency, or there may be hypermobility of the sphincter muscle. So the hypermobility of the urethral sphincter may be because of nerve damage, that is the pudendal nerve damage. The pudendal nerve normally control the external urethral sphincter, and it is a voluntary control of the sphincter. And there may be a loss of the pelvic support due to the damage to the nerves or damage to the muscle. So in stress incontinence, there is incompetent urethral sphincter, and it occurs because of either deficiency of the sphincter or because of damage to the pudendal nerve. The risk factors for stress incontinence include multiple vaginal deliveries, injury to the perineum that occur during post-op delivery, a birth weight more than 4 kg, a macrosomic baby, or there is perineal trauma occur during surgery. The other risk factors that lead to a stress incontinence include advancing age, postmenopausal lady. Because of decrease in the estrogen, there is a decrease in the laxity of the muscle. Similarly, connective tissue diseases that include Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, Marfan syndrome, and obesity. All of these may lead to the stress incontinence. Next is the presentation of the patient of stress incontinence. So the patient of stress incontinence complain of urinary leakage during running, sneezing, or cupping. So she or he had a loss of urine during performing certain activities, and there are also irritative symptoms like there may be urinary urgency, which means sudden desire to urinate. There may be urinary frequency occur, and urinary loss and stress incontinence usually occur in the form of small spurts, and the nocturia and the enuresis are uncommon and stress incontinence. For the diagnosis of stress incontinence, initially we take the history in which the patient will present with these signs and symptoms, and similarly we will do pelvic examination. We also do the neurological examination. We also do certain tests like urine analysis and culture to exclude infection, and we will do urodynamic study. The most important is the cystometry. So in cystometry, there will be no detrosal muscle contraction, but there is a leakage of urine due to increase in the intra-abdominal pressure. So remember that on urodynamic study, during stress incontinence, there will be no involuntary detrosal muscle contraction. Next is the treatment of a patient of stress incontinence. So the treatment options include conservative management and the surgical management. In conservative management, we advise the patient to do pelvic floor exercises. Similarly, we also advise the patient to reduce the fluid intake and reduction of the caffeine intake. And similarly, we do advise the patient the bladder retraining, which means to hold the urine in between the wide prolong the duration in between the voiding. Next is the surgical treatment of the stress incontinence. So surgery is the mainstay of treatment for the stress incontinence, and these surgical procedures include mid-tap urethral procedure, calposuspension, and the pre-urethral injection of the bulking agent. First is the Calpo suspension. So Calpo suspension is done either to open surgery, which is known as Birch Calpo suspension, and it can be also done by laparoscopy. And Calpo suspension involves the attachment of the urethral sphincters to the pubic symphysis. And the aim of this procedure is to elevate the urethral sphincter high in the intra-abdominal location, and it has a cure rate of about 80 to 85%. So in Calpo suspension, we attach the urethral sphincter to the pubic symphysis, and we elevate the urethral sphincter. But the complication of this procedure involve difficulty in urination. There may be high chances of bladder perforation. There may be a new onset of the overactive bladder symptom occur. There may be posterior vaginal prolapse, which is more common in the Calpo suspension, specifically the open Calpo suspension. Next one is a mid-urethral tape procedure. This procedure involves the insertion of Pauline tape underneath the mid-urethra, and it is a surgical method of choice for stress incontinence, and it has a cure rate of 80 to 85%. And the last one is the urethral injection. This procedure involves the injection of a bulking agent around the urethra at the level of the bladder neck, and the aim of this injection is to coat the urethral mucosa and prevent the leakage of urine during stressful condition. And the pre-urethral injection are suitable for those women who are unfit for the surgery, or those who are obese and having multiple comorbid condition. And this injection is a cure rate of around 60 to 80%. And the bulking agent that we inject include the macroplastica and the bulkamid. Second one in the incontinence is the urge incontinence. Urge incontinence occur because of the detrosal overactivity, and the urge incontinence is defined as the urinary incontinence that occur due to the involuntary contraction of the detrosal muscle during the filling phase of the bladder. So in urge incontinence, there is involuntary detrosal muscle contraction which causes the leakage of the urine. The causes of urge incontinence include idiopathic. So most of the cases of the urge incontinence are idiopathic, and the causes are known. But the risk factors include obesity, smoking, previous hysterectomy, previous continence surgery, and the neurogenic causes, which include multiple sclerosis, spina bifida, and upper motor neuron lesions. All of these factors can contribute to the urge incontinence. Next is the presentation of a patient of urge incontinence. So the most common symptom of urge incontinence is the urgency. Urgency means the sudden desire to urinate and inability to hold the urine. And the patient also complain of urinary frequency, and the stress incontinence is also common in patient of urge incontinence. And similarly, the nocturia and enuresis, they are also common in patient of the urge incontinence. Nocturia means the loss of urine during nighttime, and enuresis is loss of urine during daytime, and both of these are common in the urge incontinence. In urge incontinence, there is a loss of urine occur in large amount without any warning sign. Next is the diagnosis of the patient with urge incontinence. So initially we take a detailed history in which patient will present with these symptoms explained above. Similarly, we do the pelvic examination. On pelvic examination, there may be normal anatomy. We do neurological examination. Similarly, we do urine eye and culture to exclude any infection, and we also do the urodynamic study, that is the cystometry. And on urodynamic study, there is involuntary contraction of the detrosal muscle during the pairing phase of the bladder, and this involuntary detrosal muscle contraction lead to the urge incontinence. Next is the management of a patient of urge incontinence. So we have conservative option, medical treatment, and the surgical treatment. Medical treatment is the mainstay of treatment for the urge incontinence. First one is the stress conservative management of the urge incontinence. So we advise the patient to maintain a balanced fluid intake, reduce the caffeine intake, reduce body weight, stop smoking, and we also advise the patient pelvic floor exercise to strengthen the muscle. And similarly, we also advise the patient bladder training, means to hold the urine and increase the time in between the urination. Second one is the medical management. So medical management is the mainstay of treatment for the urge incontinence, and the medical management option include advising the patient either anticholinergic or sympathomimetics. And the anticholinergic drugs, they inhibit the parasympathetic activity on the detrosal muscle, and hence they causes the relaxation of the detrosal muscle, and hence they prevent the urination. And anticholinergic drugs that are used, they commonly used include oxybutynin, which act on the muscarinic receptor 1 and 2, 1 and 3, and they relax the detrosal muscle and hence prevent voiding. Similarly, we also can advise the tolterodine, which is a non-selective muscarinic receptor. We can also advise the patient imipramine, which is given during enuresis. And similarly, we can also give the patient desmopressin. Desmopressin is an ADH analog, and it causes the reabsorption of water, and hence reduces the volume of the urine. And desmopressin is usually advised when there are symptoms of nocturia. So the anticholinergic drugs, they inhibit the parasympathetic activity and causes detrosal muscle relaxation. And the anticholinergics include oxybutynin, tolterodine, and the other drugs that are used include imipramine and desmopressin. Similarly, we can also give the patient mirabegron, which is a sympathomimetic drug, and they act on the beta receptors, that is the beta 3 receptors, and they causes the relaxation of the detrosal muscle. And these drugs are advised simultaneously with the anticholinergic. And similarly, we can also give the patient estrogen. Estrogen is usually advised in patients that are postmenopausal, and they can be used as a topical vaginal agent for 3 months to relieve the irritative symptoms. So the medical treatment options include anticholinergics, sympathomimetics, and estrogen. The third one is the surgical management. So surgical treatment is the second line, second option for the urge incontinence. And the surgical options include sacral neuromodulation and the injection of the botulinum. The botulinum is a neurotoxin, and it causes the paralysis of the detrosal muscle. And the action of botulinum injection lasts for 3 to 6 months, and they are repeated after 6 months. And these botulinum injection, they reduces the urgency in the leakage episode by 60 to 80%. But its major drawback is there is difficulty in the urination in around 8 to 15% of the cases. Last one is the overflow incontinence. Overflow incontinence is the involuntary loss of the urine because of the increase in the intravesical pressure. And when the intravesical pressure rises, then the urethral pressure, the urethra becomes open, and there will be loss of urine, a leakage of the urine. So in overflow incontinence, there is raise in the intravesical pressure from over distended bladder, which exceed the urethral pressure and will lead to the leakage of the urine. The causes of overflow incontinence include decrease in the detrosal muscle activity. There may be bladder outlet obstruction of certain drugs that causes inhibition of the detrosal muscle activity and will lead to the accumulation of the urine in the bladder and causes the overflow incontinence. So the causes of detrosal underactivity include include advancing age, decrease in the estrogen in the postmenopausal women, or the peripheral neuropathy that occur in diabetes, B12 deficiency, and the spinal pathologies that include multiple sclerosis and the spinal stenosis. The bladder outlet obstruction that may lead to the overflow incontinence include fibroids, pelvic organ prolapse, urethral structure, and the over correction of the urethra. All of these can cause compression of the urethra and will raise the intravesical pressure and will lead to the overflow incontinence. And the pharmacological causes include ganglionic blockers, anticholinergic drugs, which relax the detrosal muscle and will lead to the accumulation of urine. Similarly, the epidural block and the spinal anesthesia. All of these lead to the overflow incontinence. And the patient present with the symptoms of the incontinence means the involuntary loss of urine. There will be poor streaming occur and there is incomplete bladder emptying because of decrease in the contraction of the detrosal muscle, and the patient will do effort or straining to urinate. For the diagnosis of overflow incontinence, first of all, we will take a detailed history in which the patient will present with the above symptoms. Similarly, we do the pelvic examination, which show normal anatomy. We do neurological examination, which shows decrease in the pudendal nerve sensation, and the urine. We also do the urine culture and the urine RE to exclude any infection, and we also do the urodynamic study. On urodynamic study, there will be raise in the intravesical pressure and there will be raise in the residual urinary volume. Next is the treatment of the patient of overflow incontinence. As we know that an overflow incontinence there is decrease in the detrosal muscle contraction. So we will give certain drugs that increases the contraction of the detrosal muscle and will lead to the urination. And these drugs either include the parasympathomimetics, which causes the contraction of the detrosal muscle and will lead to the urination. Or we can also give the patient alpha adrenergic blockers, that is the tamsulosin, which relax the external urethral sphincter and will lead to the urination. And similarly, we can also advise the patient intermittent self-catheterization, discontinue any drug that relaxes the detrosal muscle, and similarly, we can give the cholinomimetics and alpha adrenergic blockers. Today we will talk about the cervical tumors. So cervix is the lower and narrow part of the uterus that include the supravaginal part and the vaginal part. And the cervix include the internal os and the external os. And in between the internal and external os is the endocervical canal. And the cervix is divided into two main parts. One is the endocervix, which is lined by the columnar epithelium, and the ectocervix, which is lined by the squamous epithelium. So now let's talk about the benign condition, in which the first one is the cervical ectropion. Ectropion is a condition in which the normal squamous epithelium of the ectocervix is replaced by the columnar epithelium. So cervical ectropion is defined as the presence of the columnar epithelium on the ectocervix, and it is associated with excessive vaginal discharge that is non-prevalent in nature. And the patient of cervical ectopion may present with the postcoital bleed, that is the bleeding after the intercourse, because the fine blood vessel within the columnar epithelium are easily traumatized, and it is a normal phenomenon that is associated with a high level of estrogen that occur during the ovulatory phase of the menstrual cycle, during pregnancy, and the women who use oral contraceptive pills. So, and the treatment of cervical ectropion is discontinue the all contraceptive pills, and similarly we also do the ablation with the help of a thermal probe, and the ablation destroy the epithelium up to a depth of around 3 to 4 So cervical ectropion is the presence of the columnar epithelium on the ectocervix, and it is associated with excessive vaginal discharge, and it occurs during the ovulatory phase during pregnancy and women who use all contraceptive pills. And the treatment include discontinue all contraceptive pills and the ablation of the epithelium. Second one is the Nebotian cyst. Nebotian cyst is also a benign cervical condition, and it is a mucus retention cyst that occur on the surface of the ectocervix. And the Nebotian cyst occur because of the blockage of the endocervical mucosal gland due to the squamous metaplasia that occur within the transformation zone of the ectocervix. So in Nebotian cyst, there is a blockage of the mucus gland occurred by the squamous metaplasia, and it involves the transformation zone of the active cervix. And the Nebotian cysts usually appear as a small white and pimple-like elevation that usually occur singly, but can also occur in groups. And they are common in women of reproductive age, and they do not require any specific treatment. Next is the cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. Neoplasia means the abnormal growth of a cell that involve only the epithelium of the cervix, and the basement membrane is intact. So CIN is defined as the cervical dysplasia with intact basement membrane, and it is regarded as a precursor lesion for the carcinoma of the cervix. And the CIN commonly involve the transformation zone of the cervix, and it is the CIN is a histological diagnosis, and it is associated with the following risk factor. So the common risk factor for CIN is persistent infection with a high risk human papilloma virus, that is human papilloma virus 16, 18, 31, 33, and 45. Similarly, the multiple sexual partners, early age at the past intercourse, chlamydia infection, immunosuppression, all of these are the risk factors for the CIN. So CIN is simply the cervical dysplasia with intact basement membrane. It is a precursor lesion for the carcinoma of cervix, and it involves the transformation zone, and it is a histological diagnosis. And the most common risk factor is persistent infection with the human papilloma virus. And the CIN is classified into the following three types. First one is the CIN1, which is a mild dysplasia that involves the lower one third of the epithelium of the cervix. CIN2, which is a mild dysplasia and it involves the lower two-thirds of the epithelium, and CIN is the severe dysplasia that involves the full thickness of the epithelium. So CIN1 is a mild dysplasia, CIN2 is the moderate dysplasia, and CIN3 is the severe dysplasia that involves the full thickness of the epithelium. Next is the screening of the CIN. So CIN one can spontaneously regress in about 60% of the cases, and this patient can only be observed. And the CIN2 and 3 are less likely to regress, and therefore they require treatment. And the CIN2 and 3 can progress to the cervical cancer in about 20% of the cases if they are left untreated. So the first one in the screening is the cytology. So cervical cytology is the best initial screening test, and the cytology include either the liquid-based cytology or the Pap smear. And cervical cytology may be normal in about 95% of the women, and they require only follow-up. And there may be minor cytological abnormalities found. If there are minor cytological abnormalities on the screening test, then we do the high-risk human papilloma virus DNA test, and if there are high-grade cytological abnormalities, then we do colposcopy. So the initial screening test is the cytology, which is either liquid-based or the Pap smear. Next, we do the high-risk human papilloma virus DNA testing, and this test has a high negative predictive value. Means that if this test is negative, then the risk of developing cervical cancer is very low. And this test is done when the initial screening test there shows minor cytological abnormalities, and if this test is negative, then we do only routine follow-up, and if this test is positive, then we do colposcopy. Third one is the colposcopy. Colposcopy is the detailed examination of the cervix to identify the CIN and the invasive carcinoma, and it is both diagnostic and therapeutic. And it involves the use of colposcope, which is a binocular operating microscope with a magnification power of 5 to 20 times, and it is done by a patient who show high-grade cytological abnormalities on the screening test, or a patient who have positive high-grade human papilloma virus DNA testing. And this test involves the application of acetic acid and the iodine, and areas of increased cell turnover, the CIN will appear white on the application of acetic acid, and on iodine the area of CIN will pale to turn brown. So colposcopy is used to identify the CIN and the invasive carcinoma, and it is both diagnostic and therapeutic. And it is done in a patient who have high-grade cytological abnormalities on the screening test, or who show the high-grade human papilloma virus DNA testing. And a patient who have low-grade appearing CIN on colposcopy, they require only follow-up and 6 months with cytology. And a patient who have high-grade CIN, they require treatment. Next is the management and follow-up of a CIN patient. So the treatment options for CIN1 is follow-up in 6 months with colposcopy and repeated cytology, because in majority of the cases the CIN1 may regress spontaneously, whereas the CIN2 and 3 they require treatment, and the treatment include ablative modalities and the excisional modalities. First one is the ablative modalities. Ablative modalities involve the ablation of the epithelium showing neoplastic features in the transformation zone. And the ablative modalities include cryotherapy, laser vaporization, and the cold coagulation. And it can be done by CIN1, CIN2, and the CIN3. And ablative procedures are quick, they are cheap, and they are easy to learn. But the main disadvantage of these modalities are that there is no histology available for review. Second one is the excisional procedures. The excisional procedure include larger loop excision of the transformation zone, which is the most common excisional procedure. Other procedures include excision with the help of diathermy wire, carbon dioxide laser, and the cold knife conization. So larger loop excision of transformation zone is the definitive treatment for the high grade CIN, that is the CIN2 and CIN3, and it is safe and easy to perform and usually possible with local anesthesia. And the excisional margin obtained should be at least 7 millimeter deep. And the advantages of larger loop excision is this procedure is effective because 95% of the women will have negative cytology at around 6 months, and it also provides tissue pathological diagnosis, and it is a cost efficient procedure. But the disadvantages include increasing risk of second trimester miscarriages due to the large repeated excision of a cervix, and they also increase the risk of preterm delivery. And similarly, there may be incomplete excision of the lesion occur. And follow-up after the excisional and the ablative procedures include follow-up is usually done in 6 months with cytology and the human papilloma virus DNA testing. And if the follow-up screening tests are positive, then we do colposcopy, and if they are negative, then we do routine screening within 3 years. Next is the current guidelines for the cervical cancer screening. First one is the American Cancer Society guidelines. According to these guidelines, the cervical cancer screening has decreased the incidence and the mortality of the cervical cancer. And the cervical cancer screening involves cytology, that is the pap smear or the liquid-based cytology, and the human papilloma virus DNA testing. And the screening age for the CINS, the screening age should be started at the age of 21, irrespective of the sexual activity. And the women who are less than 30 years of age, we do only pap test, and the pap smear should be repeated every 3 years. And human papilloma virus testing is not recommended, and it should only be done if there is abnormal pap smear. And women who are more than 30 years of age, we do the pap smear every 3 years. We do the pap smear with the human papilloma virus testing every 5 years. And the women who are vaccinated against the human papilloma virus still follow the same guidelines. And the women of any age should not be screened every year by any of the screening method. So the screening methods include the pap smear or the liquid-based cytology and the human papilloma virus testing. And the screening should be started at the age of 21 years. And women that are less than 30 years of age, we do only pap test. It should be repeated every 3 years. And the human papilloma virus testing is only done if there is abnormal pap smear. And the women who are more than 30 years of age, the pap test should be repeated every 3 years, or the pap test should be done along with the human papilloma virus testing after every 5 years. And next is when to stop the screening for the CIN. So the women who are more than 65 years of age, along with the inadequate prior screening, who had two consecutive co-test of pap smear and human papilloma virus test negative in the past 10 years, and who have three negative consecutive pap smear tests in the past 10 years. Along with there is no history of high-grade dysplasia, and there are no risk factors, that there are no history of smoking, no human papilloma virus-related diseases, no new sexual partner, and no history of immunosuppression, and there is no history of exposure to the diethyl cell And the women who had done subtotal hysterectomy, in which the cervix is intact, they also require the same guideline for the screening. And the women who had undergone total hysterectomy, in which cervix is also removed, they require no screening for CIN. Now let's talk about the pap smear. So pap smear is a cytological screening test, and it is done for the detection of the pre-malignant lesion of the cervix. And the recommended age for the pap smear is 21 years. So this test should be started at the age of 21 years, and it should be repeated every 3 years. And the pap smear is done alone in women in between the 21 to 29 years of age, and the pap smear should be done along with the human papilloma virus DNA testing in women more than 30 years of age, and it should be continued until the age of 65 years. And the technique for the pap smear is within the 24 hour of testing, avoid touching, menstruating, heavy sexual intercourse, and avoid using tampons. Similarly, place the patient in a lithotomy position and then select an appropriate size cusp or speculum to retract both anterior and posterior vaginal wall and expose the cervix. Then obtain two samples from the cervix. First one is the ectocervical sample that is obtained with the help of IR spatula by scraping the transformation zone. And the second sample is the endocervical sample, which is obtained with the help of cytobrush in non-pregnant women and with the help of cotton tap applicator in the pregnant woman. And the smearing methods include two types. First one is the conventional method, and second one is a liquid-based cytology. In conventional method, a specimen obtained are smeared on a glass slide, and then we apply a preservative agent, that is ethyl alcohol, on it, and then examine the smear under microscope. Second one is the liquid-based cytology. In liquid-based cytology, the specimen obtained is rinsed into a preserving solution, that is ethyl alcohol, and then deposited on a slide as a thin layer of the process cell. Next is the interpretation of the pap smear. So for the interpretation of pap smear, we have a specific classification system, that is the Batista system. According to this system, the pap smear result shows two types of cellular abnormalities, that is either the squamous cell abnormalities or the glandular abnormalities. First one is the squamous cell abnormalities that include atypical squamous cells, which include atypical squamous cells of unknown significance and atypical squamous cells, and which we cannot include in the high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion. Second one is the low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion, which correspond to mild dysplasia, that is CIN1, and third one is the high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions that include moderate dysplasia, which is CIN2, and the severe dysplasia, that is CIN3, in the atypical squamous cells of unknown significance. And fourth one is the squamous cell carcinoma. So the squamous cell abnormalities include atypical squamous cells, low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesions, high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion, and the squamous cell carcinoma. Second one, cellular abnormalities found on the pap smear are the glandular cell abnormalities that include the atypical cells that are non-specific, and neoplastic atypical cells, adenocarcinoma in situ, and the adenocarcinoma, which is endocervical or endometrial in origin. Now we will talk about the cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is the second most common cancer in women worldwide after the breast cancer, and the cervical cancer arises from the squamocolumnar junction, which is the site where the columnar epithelium of the endocervix combined with the stratified squamous epithelium of the ectocervix. And the cervical cancer is a similar risk factors as that for the CIN, and the risk factors include infection with the human papilloma virus, multiple sexual partners, and early age at the time of intercourse, and immunosuppression and chlamydia infection. And the presentation of cervical cancer patient include postcoital bleed, intermenstrual bleed, postmenopausal bleed, and a picture that are suggestive of advanced disease include patient presenting with a history of heavy bleed vaginally, and there may be signs of ureteric obstruction. There may be a history of weight loss, or there may be bowel disturbances like history of constipation, etc. And there may be fistula formation occur, which occur in advanced disease. And the most common fistula is vesicovaginal fistula, which is the abnormal communication between the vagina and the bladder. Next one is the type of the cervical cancer. So the types include squamous cell carcinoma, which is the most common type of the cervical cancer, account by about 70% of the cases. The other types include adenocarcinoma, clear cell carcinoma, sarcomas of the cervix, neuroendocrine tumor, and the glassy cell tumor. Next is the investigation done in case of the cervical cancer. So initially we do the colposcopy, which is the detailed examination of the cervix, and it is both diagnostic and therapeutic values. Second is the cervical biopsy. Cervical biopsy is important, and it is done to confirm the malignancy and also to identify the type of the tumor. Similarly, we also do MRI of the abdomen and pelvis, and the MRI is done to assess the local spread of the disease and also to identify where there is a lymph node involvement occur or not, and the cervical cancer is staged clinically. Next is the metastatic workup for cervical cancer. So we do full blood count. We also do urine electrolyte. We do liver function test in case of liver metastasis. We also do chest X-ray in case of uh, symptoms related to the chest or the lungs. Similarly, we also do intravenous pyelography, but it is not commonly done. Similarly, we also do CT chest, abdomen, and pelvis. We also do MRI abdomen and pelvis, and we also do cystoscopy in case of extension to the bladder. And similarly, we also do magnetic microscopy in case of rectal involvement. Next is the staging of the cervical cancer. So the cervical cancer is divided into four main stages. The stage one, the tumor or the cancer is confined to the cervix, and the stage one is divided into 1A and 1B. And 1A there is microscopic disease occur, and 1B there is microscopic disease occur. And the 1A include A1 type and the A2 type. And A1 the maximum horizontal dimension is 7 mm, while the depth of invasion is 3 mm. While in A2 the depth of invasion is about 3 to 5 mm. And in 1B there is macroscopic involvement of the cervix, which is then divided into two types, B1 and the B2 lesions. B1 lesion are less than 4 centimeter, B2 lesions are more than 4 centimeter. And stage 2 the tumor extend beyond the cervix, and stage 2 is then further divided into two types, stage 2A, in which the tumor involve the upper two-third of the vagina, and 2B in which the tumor involve the parametrium. And the 5-year survival rate in stage 2 is 65%, while in stage 1 is 80%. And stage 3 is further divided into three main types, stage 3A that involve the lower one-third of vagina, stage 3B in which the tumor extend to the pelvic side wall, and if there is ureteric obstruction occur, it causes obstructive hydronephrosis, and the 5-year survival rate is 35%. And stage 4 is metastasis occur, and stage 4 is divided into stage 4A, in which there is extension into the bladder anteriorly, posteriorly into the rectum, and there may be extension beyond the true pelvis occur. And stage 4B, they involve the distant organ like liver and lungs. So according to Apigo staging, the cervical cancer is divided into stage 1, in which the tumor is confined to the cervix, and there may be 1A in which there is microscopic involvement of the cervix, 1B in which there is macroscopic involvement of the cervix. And stage 2, the tumor extend beyond the cervix, and 2A tumor involve the upper two-third, and 2B the tumor involve the parametrium. And stage 3, the tumor, stage 3A, the tumor involve the lower one-third of the vagina, 3B the tumor involve the pelvic side wall, and stage 4 there is metastasis occur, and stage 4 there is involvement of bladder rectum occur, and stage 4B there is involvement of distant organ occur. Next is the treatment of the cervical cancer. So surgery is the mainstay of treatment for the carcinoma of the cervix, and the surgery we do for cervical cancer is known as Wertheim hysterectomy. And this surgical procedure involves the removal of the cervix, uterus, cervical tissue, upper vagina, and also the removal of the pelvic lymph node. And the complication of this surgical procedure include bladder dysfunction, bleeding, increasing chances of infection in the ureteric fistula. Next is the treatment of the cervical cancer on the basis of staging. So in stage 1, we have A1 in which there is microscopic involvement of the cervix. We do wide local excision with the clear margins. And stage 1B, we do either Wertheim hysterectomy or we do pelvic radiotherapy. Pelvic radiotherapy is done in patients who are too obese or unfit for the surgery. And from stage 2 to stage 4, we do radiotherapy. We do combined radio chemotherapy. And the radiotherapy include external beam radiotherapy, a brachytherapy, which is internal radiotherapy that involve the insertion of selenium rods into the uterus. So it was all about the cervical cancer and its treatment.